Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Just Great People podcast. It's Barry Eustance here. The Just Great People podcast is about ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. And my guest today is someone who fits that category perfectly on two accounts, at least. Nick Parks is a world champion and European champion open water swimming, but he's also the only guest I've ever interviewed who's died for 20 minutes. And the real kernel of this podcast is going to be Nick's journey up to that point, but very importantly, what he's done since. Welcome to the Success Consultancy's Just Great People podcast, the podcast that introduces you to ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. My name is Barry Eustance, and I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Nick, welcome to the Just Great People podcast. I'm so pleased to have you on.
Thank you very much, Barry. It's quite overwhelming to be asked to talk about something which was a life-changing incident in no uncertain terms, and I've been given the opportunity to talk about it now and open people's minds up about something which is hidden.
Yeah, and we're going to come on to that because I know how important it is to you and to all of us. And a little bit of background, how Nick and I are on the same podcast together today. Simon Hartley, who you will have seen a podcast with me, produced a program called This Is Mental about people who are facing huge challenges. And Simon's sent it to me to look at. And Nick was one of the participants facing your big, hairy, audacious challenge, Nick. And this will surprise you. Nick is a world champion open water swimmer. The big challenge for you, Nick, was
speaking on a stage to people about my story. And that's something which we probably all stand in front of our companies and presentations and think that's just an easy thing to do. But when you've had something which took me out of this planet and from speaking to stand up in front of audiences of sizes, which could range from 40, 50 up to hundreds, about an emotive subject was my challenge. Could I do it? Could I not do it? I'd never done anything like this before, Barry. So Simon and I, kindly asked me, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to stand up in front of people, tell the story, but let's just see if we can raise some money along the line. And wow, that was just a tinderbox.
Yeah, very emotional. It's very emotional. I'll put a link in the show notes here. You should watch it. It's Tony Underwood and Nick Parks separately doing, interestingly enough, probably the thing that so many people, I mean, it keeps coming again and again and again in this podcast series, people and public speaking, and the great fear that brings. And the journey that Nick and Tony were both on to do the same thing. I mean, here are world champions, and you would think there'd be things like, no, I basically want to go underwater swimming from, the UK to the United States. No, it's public speaking. And it was a really emotional journey. I was watching it, got choked up at various points, and it says a lot about a lot of things. So I thoroughly encourage that particular series. So it's called This Is Mental by Be World Class. The next time I encountered Nick was at Lord's this summer at the Be World Class 2025 conference. And I had the opportunity to listen to Nick explaining exactly what the This Is Mental challenge was. But equally important, and what is going to become a key topic of today's conversation, is the lead up to that event during a competition where suddenly you literally expired for 20 minutes, Nick. Could you just sort of give us the background to how that all worked and how it is that you and I are still speaking today?
Yeah, would definitely. So we'll go back. I still swim competitively now and have done for the last 15, 16 years. I've been fit and kept myself fit from retiring from competitive swimming, but returned back in, as we say, about 15 years ago. And because I'm a bit of a go-getter type of guy, I set my stall out to, which we knew at the time, there was a European Championship in Holland in 2013. So I set about looking for a coach. And fortunately, our neck of the woods in North Yorkshire, we've got quite a few Olympians. And I sat down with this my current coach and said, "Look, I want to do this." She said, "I know all about you, Nick, and it's going to hurt." Well, I just burst out laughing. I said, "Right, come on then, bring it on." So we started, with some local events in Windermere and up and down the country. And I was coming out in, second, third positions. And she said, "You're doing really good, but we need to push you even harder." So there lies a little bit of the groundwork. But you need to go and challenge these other competitors around the world on their own turf. Now, in terms of swimmers, they're a lot of them are hermits. They will race in their own countries, but when it comes to an international stage, some of them shy away. So, if I can explain that, they will break records in their own country, but they will not swim in European or World Championships. It is a big ask. So, we decided to go and take Germany on, France on, Austria, Spain, etc. And who came out on the podium every time? Nick. So the eyes were on me. We won the European Championships, I may add, not making light of that, but I'd set my goal out. So there's a good bit of grounding towards Nick and how we started off. Over the following years, really, it was maintaining speed in the pool. Well, I'm not a speed swimmer, but when I transferred my open water stroke and speed into the pool, wow, that was another eye opener for lots of people. And we started breaking records in the pool as well. Anyway, I'd done the British National and Open Water Championships for 10 years leading up to 2023, and I'd won it every year, right going through all the age brackets. Again, a big ask. You've got to maintain it. There's lots of consistency there. It's turning up. You can't just turn up. There's a lot of hard work. My team, my partner, Mags, there's a lot of people behind the scenes. I just execute, for want of a better word. So 30th of July, 2023, this was what we call the Triple Crown. And I had won it probably 2 or 3 times before, but it consisted of a 5 kilometre, a 3 kilometre, and a 2 kilometre on one day. That's a massive amount. So you've not only got to control yourself, but also put yourself back in the field, because I'd got individual competitors who were just turning up that day to do the individual swims on each one. The pressure was on me. The day started off fantastic. It was sunshine. The lake was clean. I was really fit. Done a fantastic race in Spain 2 weeks prior, come second in their national championship. So I think I've used this word before. It's I was really, really strong, Barry. I felt like I'd got a coat of arm around me. And we started off and I was going quite well. I always get in with the front pack there, and we're all different ages. I don't know who I'm racing with. And we got to about 3 kilometres, and it's not hearsay. This is third party, because when I get into the story, you'll realise why. So I was in probably the first 5 or 6 swimmers, and there was probably about 80 swimmers. So Nick's up the front there. We get to 3 kilometres and bang, my heart stopped. I got round the buoy, apparently. We weren't wearing wetsuits either, may I add, and I drowned. And then, well, yeah, I was dead. Fortunately, the kayakers, fantastic support crew. We have to have support crew there. He'd noticed me, and he was probably about 50 meters away. Kayakers can move, so he got to me and managed to keep me above the water. And I'll emphasize, I didn't have a wetsuit on. I weigh probably 80 kilograms. Well, if anybody tries to lift that, that's quite a weight. He managed to keep my head above water. The powerboat came, took me to the pontoon, and, well, yeah, there was nothing there. There was no signals. I wasn't breathing, and obviously very, very cold. So they carried on giving me CPR, defib, and it eventually got a spark back. I am a jovial chap, but they got a spark back in me in this time, because again of the you have to laugh about it, because there are some fantastic points that come out of this. Yeah. Lots of people look at me and say, "How can you be like this?" Well, So within that time capsule, the air ambulance thankfully arrived with their just fantastic fantastic amount of medical intervention and managed to what they call intubate. So they put a tube back into me to get the oxygen in. I was hypothermic, and there was a massive concern for my critical well-being. And by that, I mean, we've already mentioned I was dead for 20 minutes. There was no oxygen going to my kidneys, my brain. The cells start to not decompose, but not function. And post the event, they're massively surprised that I even came out of it. So very briefly, when we got to hospital, and this is all from the consultants, because of my strength of my heart and the fact that I was so fit, the right-hand side of my heart had compensated for the two blockages, which we subsequently found out, on the left-hand side. And had I not been as fit as that, and the capillaries carrying the blood in massive capillaries, then I don't think I would have got through it. My temperature throughout the night time went down to, I think they said 32, 3. Yes, I was obviously kept warm. My heartbeat went down to these, and, even the following day they all kept bringing junior doctors in and said, we do not know how you are still here. So that was the ins and outs of that, Barry. When I woke up in hospital, and this is another funny little thing. I've got no recollection of this, guys, anyway, in any way, shape or form. A light was shining in my eye, and the nurse said, do you know where you are? You were swimming in a lake, and what had happened? And my knee-jerk reaction was, did I win? Well, obviously not, because I was lying there. So I took solace out of that, Barry, and we are laughing about it, but I really had no idea of the severity of what indeed had happened to me, the consequences of it, the realization of the internal goings on, and what was going to subsequently happen as a result of where I was.
And that you had an 11-to-1 chance probability of actually not surviving that event.
Absolutely. And again, these are numbers, statistics, data, which I done my research and found out that certainly in the Yorkshire area, it's 1 in 11. Now, if we sit down and at a dinner table, a pub, restaurant, and you count 11 people and then say one person is going to survive an out of hospital cardiac arrest, it absolutely shook me to the core. And I think I gained strength from that in the hospital when the consultants kept coming. They weren't bullying me up. They just kept saying, do you realize how lucky you are? And I didn't, Barry. It really didn't resonate with me, because I was still trying to really compute what had happened, and I didn't realize the severity, apart from looking at other people around the ward who were, let's just say to the listeners, in varying degrees of post-operative situations. And that was just a massive wake up to me, Barry.
And Nick, the mission that drove you through the This Is Mental program to have the public speaking is actually to communicate this message, isn't it? It's to and I'll explain why it really resonates with me in a minute, but it's to communicate the importance of CPR, isn't it? In making
Absolutely.
reversing those, well, certainly moving the needle on those statistics. To just close that little gap from my side, I was a trained lifeguard. I did the distinction of the Royal Life Saving Society back when I was at school, in fact. And so Resusciani, who, if you get into CPR, will become a very good friend, was again a very good friend of mine, and we spent a lot of time developing the techniques using Resusciani. And then, flying as an airline captain, we had all the onboard capability to defib people, but we were all trained in CPR every year. And I know that our crews and indeed our pilots have saved people's lives because of that capability. And this is kind of the story that is, if you like, the kernel of this podcast. Why it's important to you, dear listener, and you, dear viewer, this message that Nick is going to convey. And so, Nick, over to you to get the message across, because it's so important. So listen up, please.
Absolutely. We're just one step slightly back, which was how this gave me the impetus to do indeed what I'm doing now and being given the chance. One of the consultants sat on the bed when I was still questioning about the whys and wherefores, and he said, Nick, I'd love you to be able to go and talk to people, stand on a stage and tell them, the importance of health, looking after themselves, the exercise. He said, because you are a picture, not what a lot of people have in mind who will have a heart attack, cardiac arrest. And I said, what do you mean? He gave me, I've used this several times. He gave me a little golden nugget, which didn't mean anything at the time, but it did as the days wore on. And he said, you've just had 2 new pipes put in you. And I said, right, go on. I still didn't understand the operation. He said, it's a bit like having an old Ford Escort or, a performance car. You put silicon hoses in them to make them go faster. I said, right. He said, well, 2 of yours were blocked. He says, we've put 2 clean pipes in. Because Nick's a competitive guy. Yeah, you don't say that to me. That really was my little golden nugget. And simply putting it across, I thought, right, if that's going to make me faster and get me back into swimming, then, I can't lie in this bed and do nothing after this. So we came out of hospital and there I was, I'm just digressing slightly. I'd already in my own mind said that I wanted to go back to the championship where the event had happened. So within this time, recovery, rehabilitation, I was picking up things and I was meeting people and all my friends were coming and we started having this discussion about CPR, round the table, 8, 9 people, some of them, my friends, directors, got big companies. Do you know how to do CPR? No, we've got a first aider, Nick. That wasn't the question. I said, out of us lot round this table, and there was 9, and this is several times, by the way, people, I was getting 1 person out of 8 or 9 people. Then I started putting the conversation in tea rooms to some cyclists, varying ages, 30 to 40, whatever, who can do CPR. Well, we've got a friend who comes out, and I was realizing that the awareness just wasn't there, really wasn't there. So I raised the bar. And if everybody looks around when they're driving, some people become spotters of birds and cars. I've become a defib spotter. And I know, again, I'm making light of it, but I look to see where defibs are. There is a network out there available. You can indeed look to see whether things are happening or where they're sited. But the defib network is something which is available in all the villages. So I set off talking to my friends and saying, I think you should either get a defib if you haven't got one, or indeed look to see whether you can go on a course to understand CPR and defib. So that opened the door. And another friend of mine invited me to speak at a post-golf conference. And I'd got my story together, for want of a better word, and I set myself up as a cardiac champion. What could I do? I think I could raise money for the air ambulance. So going back to Barry's initial question, what was this about? It was about Nick spreading the story, the awareness of CPR and defib.
CPR is the method by which you can recover someone's heart by cardiac compression, and combining that with basic what used to be called mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So it's basically cardiac compression, keeping that heart pumping, boomf, 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 interspersed with inhalation of your air into the casualty to keep oxygen flowing and the blood pumping. So that's CPR. And defib is the magical piece of kit that you'll probably find at a defibrillator. And if your heart goes into fibrillation, basically you're flatlining. That's a bad thing. And that's what Nick had. Defib will get it back into its proper sawtooth type shape. You'll probably find one is down at your village hall. It'll be it'll be in a sealed box. It'll be a yellow thing and it'll tell you what to do. And it'll be an automatic defibrillator. And it might, if it doesn't save your life, it might help you save someone else's. And so just covering those 2 points, CPR is basically cardiac compression to keep the heart pumping when it's not doing it because it's in fibrillation. And that is to say it's flatlined, it's not pumping itself. So it's just that clarity for you, dear listener and dear viewer. Over to you, Nick, to take the message further forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Barry. CPR can be conducted on people who have heart attacks. So they've probably still got a pulse. They are potentially breathing. There's something going on there. You would not use a defib on somebody who still has a pulse. So the defib can be used on somebody where there is no pulse. Basically, they are not breathing, but the automatic defib will actually lead you through step by step. It will not allow you to work. It will pick up if that person has a pulse. But the team and the awareness of other people around you, you're going to save somebody's life. So the awareness that we've subsequently started with this is standing up in front of communities, groups, business functions, dinner, prior dinner, and raising that awareness. Then subsequently doing what Barry and I are doing now, it is spreading the word. And there's a ripple effect that started. There are a lot of people who will raise their eyebrows. Oh, we can't get this done. We can't get this. It means us having to go private. All I say on that one, there's a positive element to this. If you really care for your dear loved ones, your colleagues, and there are things that you're not happy with, please just go and get checked out. Everything else, our broken bones and torn ligaments give you pain. This lovely thing that's in your chest, you can't see what's going on. And, I'm a fantastic example, as has been told, that, you look at me, super fit, nothing leading on to it. There was no hereditary things. I don't drink excessively. I have a lovely Mediterranean diet. And wow, there it was. So it was hidden, Barry.
And the element
thankful
here, isn't it?
everybody around me, we're given this opportunity to raise the bar and get into other events to be able to talk about it like we are.
The point of all of this is if you break a leg, it's painful and you want to get it seen to quickly. If you suffer from cardiac arrest, your window of opportunity for recovery, in other words, to have your life saved, is minutes. It's a very narrow window of opportunity. And that Nick is here to talk to us at all, it frankly nothing short of miraculous. And it's the emphasis here is that stopwatch starts the moment you have that cardiac arrest, and you've got to act quickly. And it's not the time to be picking up a book or trying to Google what CPR means. It's the importance of having those skills at your fingertips, ready to go, because it could be your child, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, or your closest friends, or a complete stranger you meet in the street who collapses next to you. And the next thing is you are the difference between their life being saved and not. And it's such an important message and very, very close to my heart. Nick, how can our listeners and viewers get the message spread? How can they do it? What can we do to get that message out there to save more lives?
I would like people to, there are lots and lots of charities. There are lots and lots of training organisations where you can go to, even online things with the British Heart Foundation, Revive Our, to learn how to do CPR. And, as you just mentioned there, Barry, fantastic point. Even children should learn this. I'm trying to get into schools, the police force, to emphasize the importance of this and to learn how to do use a defib. So, that there are opportunities out there, organized events, or please go and do it by yourself. But there has to be a bit of homework. It's not going to come to you. And this is certainly, it's not a stumbling block. Me talking about my story, the fact that we are talking seconds to save people's lives. And if people have done these courses, they will understand and react quickly. And hopefully save somebody's life. But doing nothing is not an option. It really is not an option.
And you'll see it when someone collapses in a shopping precinct or in the street. There are a lot of people who are frozen because they haven't got the first idea what to do next. Someone will pick up a mobile phone to get an ambulance there. Frankly, as the statistics show, out of 11 people, 1 will survive that kind of event. By the time the ambulance gets there, it's possibly too late. And if you're there, you could be the person who isn't standing there in terror, but is actually taking action to keep that person alive and you'll know what to do, how to do it, and how to gain additional help to help you keep that person going until that ambulance arrives. And I think that's important, isn't it, Nick? That the ambulance has got a finite amount of time before they can get there. You are actually keeping that person in life support until that happens.
Absolutely. Certainly in my case, I'm not making a comparison here. The air ambulance, whenever you see that flying, it's going to somebody who is in a critical position. They do fly to cardiac arrest because it's critical. So when that happens, unfortunately, to somebody in a shopping mall, the air ambulance can go by helicopter, but they indeed go by the road. In other words, they can get there faster than sometimes your normal ambulance. And because the kit that they've got, they're a mobile operating team, as it were. But those initial seconds of doing CPR, you're going to help somebody, at least give them a chance. As the seconds tick away, as I've previously explained, the potential of the plumbing issue, which is the heart attack, that can then lead on to a cardiac arrest. Mine had both. The plumbing issue started and then it was electrical. So the difference there is really important. The cardiac arrest, somebody will fall down and there'll be nothing there. You've got to start this immediately, make the phone call, get other people to help. But yes, standing there doing nothing. You're absolutely right, Barry. I come from a trained background, and I still at this time of life deal with situations. If we turn up on accident, just slightly digressing, lots of people freeze. They either deal with it or they don't. I go on and deal with things, and lots of people have to be able to pick up this, even if it's a mannequin, but be put into a situation where they can do this. And I'm not on a big chant here, but the lifestyles that we are leading now and the food that's unfortunately available and the correct choices that people may or may not make are exacerbating this situation of plaque that's built up into people's arteries. And that age is now getting younger and younger and younger. And it's another kicking point for me to be able to talk to people, sports people, as we previously mentioned, and learn this all in the football clubs, the children there, the coaches, the parents, and it's something.
And
Yeah,
we know,
you're right.
Nick, don't we, that we've had footballers who've collapsed on the pitch, bang, and it's all over. Very fit people out on a Sunday game or indeed a league game, and suddenly they suffer from a cardiac arrest. And it's more prevalent, I think, as age creeps up. But it can
Absolutely.
happen at any age to
That's right.
anybody without warning.
Absolutely.
And the Just Great People podcast also goes out to a lot of business leaders through LinkedIn and the internet. So it's one to consider not only for yourself and your family, but also in the workplace, ensuring that there is, I think, awareness and capability. It's not that difficult. There'll be
Yeah.
people who come in and will bring the teams in, bring a Resusciani in. Everybody can do it. Resusciani is a life-size mannequin, as Nick mentioned, that is frighteningly lifelike, actually, and allows you to do all the right things. And if you're not doing the right things, it won't work. But it's there. It's a simulation tool, as you know. For those who've listened to the podcast, I'm a great believer in simulation because it allows you to practice ahead of the game those things that you hope you never face, and
Absolutely.
when you do, you've already done them. So if you're a business leader, got a small business, got a big business, got a huge business, it doesn't matter. Get your people trained because it will pay dividends in all sorts of ways, and more importantly at the emotional level and at just doing the right thing level. Nick, I'm going to put the links on to all the various resources.
Okay.
On the CPR side, is there anything we should be adding to this message that we haven't already in this podcast? Because there's one other thing I want to get onto, which is your contribution to the Be World Class Conference of 2025 and your
Oh, right.
takeaways from that.
Yeah.
So from the CPR side, is there anything we would like to leave our listener and viewers with?
Yeah, I think you've just raised another key point there, Barry, about workplaces. Yes, I still work and I go into companies, and one of the auditing elements is first aid. And I sound as if I'm banging the drum, but I am banging the drum because this is another element that really shone to me. And it did shock me. Yeah, I think it did. Two or three of my clients, production companies, shall remain nameless, separate warehouses, 30, 40 people, young lads up to guys in their 40s, 50s. And I asked the question, who's the first aider? they had two. So the next question is, what happens when he's on holiday? Because I look at continuity, the risk strategy, the risk to the company in terms of cost production. And the next question, I said, right, okay, how many people in this room? And there was probably about 14, 15 operatives. Who knows how to do CPR? There was only one. And the reason he knew is because he was a football referee. So I then looked at them all and I said, right, we are going to do something here. It wasn't my company, but I was in there as a consultant. I'm standing in front of you as a reason and a result of what? CPR. And then I talked about some of the elements we've touched on. What about your family? What about the people when you go out? The ripple effect has now started. You will go home. You're going to question your kids, talk to the children, and make them more aware. We've had this guy in, this happened to him, and it was only for the sake of CPR. So in the workplace, that is so important. And it's really interesting when you ask that question. It's not first aid because there are some people who don't like the gore side of things, but CPR is totally, totally separate. But it is one of the key elements to save people's lives. Yes, Barry.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick is an ISO management consultant, so he can assist you with your audits and make sure you get all of these boxes ticked, because it is important. It's important. And look,
absolutely,
Nick died for 20 minutes. Was one of the lucky 1 out of 11. He's here to deliver the message. So we will leave that message with you, dear listener and viewer, to absorb, to reflect upon, and do something about. And I mentioned the Be World Class conference that Nick also was a presenter at. And we covered this, but then we also covered the This Is Mental challenge about public speaking. Fear of public speaking. Who hasn't been there? Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, might I say. It's happened to us all, where the gremlin reaches out, grabs his throat, and you can't say anything. It's happened to me, trust me. So public speaking was one thing, but Nick was there to explain it. But Nick, you were there not only as a presenter, but then you spent your time in the audience listening to the other presenters. What was your takeaway from the event, and your thoughts for our listener and their benefit?
My takeaways from the event, both as a speaker, a sportsman, and indeed somebody who deals with businesses from small to a multi-million pound, and having the discussion around tables with chief execs and directors. So I was in that room having delivered our piece, and I was absolutely blown away by I won't say common thread, the inspiration that I left that room with. And I'll go a little bit further on that. I've gone to presentations and listened to people do talks on stages on one subject, but the people who were on that stage, some of the challenges that they'd set themselves, or indeed gone to assist people across the world, some of the challenges the individuals had set themselves to do north and south of Arctics, were absolutely mind-blowing. And I was mesmerized by the ability of the human body. There were females involved here from catastrophic incidents that would leave a lot of people wondering why on earth they're on this planet, but how they came out and they had the resolve to pick themselves up and start to play games to get to become a Paralympian. I was physically exhausted, Barry, when I came out of that room, and there was a euphoria. I was absolutely bouncing with just, wow, not only me from what I've done and come back from, but what these other people have done. And, it was electric. It was absolutely electric.
Yeah. It was just a sensational event. I mean, it is. I mentioned to you before we spoke that I'd taken I was writing copiously throughout all of this.
Yeah.
I was making notes on the Lord's, because the event was at Lord's, on the Lord's notebook, and I condensed it, and it's to give you a run up who the speakers were. There was Nick and Tony Underwood speaking about their lives and their experience, but also their this mental challenge. There was Adam Walker, Seven Oceans. He's Adam, extraordinary guy, stung by, he was swimming from across two islands in Hawaii, got stung by a Portuguese man of war, was in more pain than he's ever been in his whole life, and was actually giving himself 1 minute at a time that he felt he could get to the next thing. But he dived in the water at Gibraltar, swam to Morocco, then swam back, and taking incrementally in each step of the way. Martine Wright is the lady that Nick was referring to.
That's right.
Who was the closest. She was the closest survivor of the July 7th bombings in 2005. And then went on to become a Paralympian and in fact, the captain of the team. There was Anne Daniels, working in a bank, decided to go to the North and South Pole. Why wouldn't you? Got chased by a polar bear for 3 days. John Volanthen, if you've seen the Netflix documentary, John was one of the key drivers of getting those kids out. And Mark Pollock is an extraordinary man. Mark lost sight in both eyes to retinal detachment, but carried on to, and was it the South Pole or the North Pole? I can never remember which one he went to after that. But then fell through a window that was open that hadn't been inspected over and became paralyzed. With great humor, he explained how he's world-class at picking up disabilities, but then went on to raise $150 million to take research into the cures for paralysis out of silos and into a collaborative environment. And Mark said you can basically be a spectator or a competitor. You can be an optimist or a realist, a soloist or a collaborator in this life. And Mark Pollock, an inspiration, I think Nick would agree to us all. I mean, had draws dropping, has chosen to be a competitor, a realist and a collaborator. And certainly the takeaways I took away, and Nick is one of the elements of this statement that was crystallized for me, is to be world class is to look at the impossible and step forward anyway with belief, clarity, courage, collaboration, and endurance. The pain will fade, but the achievement and the journey that created it will last forever. Nick, anything to add to that?
Absolutely. I think I'll just take a little bit from Mark and integrate that into my story, and how when my incident had occurred, I was at home and I wasn't in a good state, but, we'll end on a positive note. I watched every one of Mark Pollock's video on YouTube, and, I couldn't walk 10, 15 paces. I was trying to go to the gym. Yes, I'm a positive guy. And I looked at Mark, I listened to Mark, and he, as Barry has said, he went across to America. He couldn't understand why the robotic teams weren't working with the physios. So he took it upon himself and got these meetings together, and he forged forward. And I thought, I can do this. I can do this with CPR. I can do this with defib, and I can start raising money. I can get into the councils, and I'm just going to bang the drum. And when I get turned away, I'll go somewhere else. So I met Mark just briefly at the conference after got his hand, and I was very emotional because I said, do you realize how, you probably don't, Mark, obviously our dialogue on internet, etc., but to get a hold of somebody's hand like that, who played a massive part on my rehabilitation, he's something else, Barry. So my other elements of taken away from that, now I made some notes as well, Barry, was about having belief and clarity in direction. I set myself that belief that I could get out there and I was going to change things. I did do that. I sat down and I put a plan together, and I knew which direction I was going to go in. I was going to literally attack some of the councils and some of the sports centres, first with my swimming club, and then let's see where we can indeed go from there. So that's what I did. And then met Simon and said to Simon, right, okay, I want to be a lot more professional with this, but I really have no idea how I'm going to do it. And I don't know whether I can stand in front of people and talk about it. So that crisis turned into a bit of clarity. And then my mission became a cardiac champion. So it's funny how it all rolled into one, Barry, and this might resonate with you. So whilst having that cardiac arrest and not knowing where I was going to go, to losing my life, everything indeed changed. My belief in that foundation that I set up, it transformed me. It transformed a lot of people around me. And what have I done now? I've started the cycle off. I've now got people to do CPR. They've gone away. They've gone and done defib. They're starting to talk. And my little area of ripples is actually gathering momentum. It's worked with the air ambulance. The air ambulance are now using me, which is a lovely payback for me. And I've got a massive amount of hope and belief that this will grow even further, Barry. So I got so much out of that, and I thought little old Nick, he's going to get up there, have his speech, and that'll be it. But it's gone massive. Thank you.
And from being world class both in the open water arena to being world class as a cardiac champion, Nick Parks, I couldn't thank you enough for bringing this message and actually for the inspiration that you've given us all. It's been fantastic, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on the Just Great People podcast.
Thank you, Barry. And I really mean that, to be given the opportunity and for people who probably sitting on the fence and they'll have the whys and wherefores. I can't change that. Super fit guy. It can happen anywhere. And to be given this opportunity, platform, Barry, I do truly, truly thank you. And I hope some people do take heed of what we've discussed here and go and pick the CPR up and pick the old dolly up and go and do some compressions. I know we're making joke of it, but you'll feel so happy that it's not a talent, it's a skill, and it will stay with you for life. Thank you, Barry.
Absolutely. Nick, thank you so much. We'll speak again very soon, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
So that's it for today's Just Great People podcast from the Success Consultancy. We hope and trust you've enjoyed it. Please join us next time and please do remember to subscribe. Thanks for joining us.